This is Capitalize Your Finances, the show representing you, a select group of excited, ready, and fired up listeners seeking to potentially maximize your money moves and get after it. We don't settle for generic advice of always and nevers. Our currency is our intellect, and we constantly seek the logical way of likely creating advantages to potentially maximize wealth for our personal and unique situations. The show brings you this step-by-step framework to capitalize your finances in the aspects of your financial situation, and we strive to explore strategies and ideas to potentially help you capitalize on your financial decisions. We are capitalizers, and this is our show.
Welcome back to Capitalize Your Finances. As always, I'm your host, Christopher A. Paniotti, the Cap in Capitalize. And today we have a very special guest, one of my new best friends of the year 2023, our Lord and Savior. He is the author of Blue Collar Cash, the founder of Rusk Industries. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, Ken Rusk, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. And I loved your book, Blue Collar Cash. For those of you listening in, if you've not bought it, what are you doing? Go on Amazon right now and buy it. No pressure, but his family's financial future depends on it. And because of the book, I actually want to dive right in because you go over a lot of not only surface level black and white things that people need to know about their financial livelihood, whether you're blue collar or white collar. But there's a lot more profound business pieces of advice that I want to discuss. And so right out of the gate, I believe you mentioned a study by Andrea J. Stenberg that states, quote, in order to internalize a new concept or idea, meaning to integrate it into your values, beliefs, and identity, you must hear it or see it a minimum of 7 times. Now, coincidentally, when I started my business, I learned very early on, even though it's a white-collar job, it took about 7 times or 7 asks until we got the business. And so my question is to you, Ken, in the blue-collar world, in general, how much education goes into the sales side of the training, and what about networking?
Well, that's a great question. So a long time ago, and I will date myself if I tell you how long ago, I went to a Tom Hopkins sales class. For those of you that know Tom Hopkins, he was back in the he was like maybe after the Zig Ziglar days, but before, the current. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, I was fortunate because I worked really hard and I had to think about, internalize, and memorize a lot of kind of closes, if you will. And I ended up taking 4th out of like 600 or 700 people that were in that class. And I remember that the way that I did it was just by repeating it and then internalizing it and trying to see what the words meant. It's one thing to hear something 7 times. It's another thing to kind of put a picture to that word. So for me, seeing it, and that's really half the premise of my book is seeing it first and getting it. What the mind sees, it attracts itself to. It's our brain is so powerful, and we don't even use most of it in our lifetime. So to tap into some of the visual sides of our brain, which is again what most big thinkers do, and I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about guys like Elon Musk and people that that invent huge industries, okay, Bill Gates and the rest of them, they see things. So to put something, a word or a phrase together with a picture, and to do that 7 times, usually locks it in pretty well.
Sure. Well, and also now that I'm thinking about it, because with anything blue collar, you're generally producing something. The sale is pretty black and white. Like even if you're not socially inept, shall we say, if you put out a beautiful product, it's going to be a beautiful product. Versus in the white collar world, you can't necessarily feel it. It's not tangible all the time. And so do you think that it's a preconceived notion that a lot of these blue collar business owners that start out, they think, oh, my product is going to get me there, and they forget that the personal side is just as, if not more important?
Yeah, I think you're right on with that. I also think it depends on how much you want to grow your business. I mean, obviously, you can find people that are in absolute 100% dire need of what you do, and you're the only one that does it, and that's near to them. So by default, you're going to win that contract. I think if you want to grow your business and get beyond that particular need, then you need to start developing needs and wants. And in order to develop needs and wants, you have to paint pictures for people, and you have to get those pictures internalized. And typically that takes, multiple times of seeing that type of motivation or that emotional connection or that need. So, you can either just wait for the phone to ring or you can go out and make your business happen. And I think if you want to make it really happen and grow, you got to get after it. And one of the ways by doing that is really putting out an amazing story, a compelling story about what it is that you actually do to people that may be thinking, well, someday I might need that, but I don't know if it's right now. And you can convert them to now that way.
Well, in speaking of growth, so back in 1986, you started with 6 employees. And over the years, growing it to over 200, that's no joke. I mean, that is some serious growth. And so my question is more so on scaling. And I've personally been under the mentality of growing lean and mean. And the beauty with a service-based business is you can do that. And I'm super fortunate to have the best unbiased teammate/assistant in Betty. Shout out to Betty. Love you to death. So we've grown more and more efficient over the years, which has kicked the can down the road of eventually bringing people on. However, there is going to be a point where I know, even though we joke Betty's never going to retire, that I know she's going to want to retire because she'll be sick and tired of me or whatever the case is. And so that will eventually lead to us bringing on more admin. So my question is, how did you overcome the hiring process that so many CEOs face? And did it get easier as time went on?
I think it's all in the messaging, and that's a great question. So for me, it used to be that you could have an ad in the paper and 15 people would be in your foyer the next day, all wanting that job. Well, now it's a little different. Now you'll have 3 people in your foyer, and they're looking back at you saying, "Hey, man, what's in it for me to work here?" So the hiring environment has totally changed, and I've hired a couple thousand people over the last 30 years. So I could see it, I could feel it, I could actually experience it. So for me, I thought, well, okay, so I need to answer that question. I need to get really good at. You could be off-put by that question, by the way. I mean, you could say, hey, the ego kicks in, me boss, you employee, how dare you ask me that question? But I flipped that right away because I wanted people that wanted to work here and could figure out, well, okay, so what Ken's saying here is through his culture that I can obviously see, feel, I can experience this stuff right as soon as I walk in the door. They started to think, well, maybe I can find a way to make my life work with and through this company that Ken has. So I found that by replicating as many people as I could and getting them as quickly as I could into an entrepreneurial mode. Okay, you've heard the term entrepreneurial employees. So I wanted to just get as many people around me that were all thinking, okay, I'm going to work for me first and Ken second. Okay, I'm going to be selfish here. And I don't mean selfish at the detriment of others. I mean focused on self. Most times people talk about, when they're hiring, they talk about what their company does and what you're going to be doing and the uniform you're going to wear and the time you have to be here and your salary and everything else. But they very often say, well, why are you here? Like, I know you need a job. Let's get that out of the way. I know you need money. But for what? Like, what's your world all about? And when you start asking that question, first off, you get people to look at you like deer in the headlights, like no one's ever asked me that. I can't believe you care that much about me as a person. And I wanted to replicate what I knew I could do. And I wanted to replicate that as many times as possible. They say find the right formula, then scale it, like replicate it as much as you can. So that's what I did. And I just tried to surround myself with people who are all saying, I can get what I want from myself with and through this company. Ken cares about my future more than anything else. And that's how it started, and it just kind of goes from there.
Well, so speaking of wanting everything for your employees, so you mentioned in the book one of your first employees, Tim, in his journey, in your journey alongside him, digging him out of a rut, maybe literally, and in building a vision with him for him and his family's future. So from a business perspective, obviously as the company grows, that becomes I would imagine, increasingly more difficult for you because you can't put all of your attention on 200 people like you can with one. Like it's mathematically impossible. And not to mention there's turnover, all of that. And so in your business today, because I know what you want for people, not just your people, but everyone, whether it's your classes, book,
Sure.
How do you keep that love and that concentrated love for your people alive today in that type of vision and mentality? And then I'm also going to push back and say, if some people come in, they go, look, I just want to do my job and I want to be a great employee. Can that be enough?
Well, the second question is, I want to do a good job and I want to be a good employee. I would just say, okay, why?
Sure.
Why do you want to be a good employee? Why do you just want to do your job? What's in it for you then to do that? Because I don't think anybody comes to work without some type of reason or some type of, they want to belong, they want to have security, they want to make some money, they want to advance their life. I don't think anyone comes to work to just remain status quo for the rest of their lives. I think they're exposed to lots of different things in the world and things that intrigue them and maybe things that they desire or whatever, ways that they can improve their life. So, if somebody came to me and said, I don't really have a reason for working, I just need to work, maybe that's not the employee that I want.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
If I can eventually dig deeper and break that shell a little bit and find out what the real motivation is. So, and as far as it becoming increasingly difficult, well, I have to tell you that once somebody understands that you as a manager, employer, boss, whatever you want to call it, once they understand that you really want to see them win, and I got to tell you, Chris, I've said this a million times in front of the whole staff, I can't get what I want for myself, nor can my company get what it wants and needs until all of you get what you want for yourselves first. I mean, this is a pretty simple input versus output scenario, and I'm usually at the end of the output, okay?
Yeah.
That's how business owners work typically. So, and they believe that. And so as soon as they start hitting small goals first, like, they paid off that annoying Visa card, or they got their driver's license straightened out, or maybe they got their first used car, or they built the checking account, or whatever it might be. They got their first apartment, or they're saving for a house, down payment for a house. Once they start winning at that, they become self-sufficient at that. And now it's like, okay, Ken, thanks for that training. Thanks for that little launch pad. Now get out of my way and let me go build my life. And so the more that happens, the more that catches fire with everybody else. And now we literally have a big black glass board hanging on the wall in our offices here, with all these little tiny goals written all over it. I'm going to start on April 1st. I'm going to save this much money a week. I'm going to get this thing accomplished. I'm going to end it by June 20th. And they sign it and date it, and off they go. And everyone gets to kind of share in that. So people recognize really quick who the people are that are chasing things and who the people are that aren't. And I can tell you, it just so happens to be that the people that are chasing things are all the ones that have the highest, best positions, the most well-paid positions
Sure.
in the company, because it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point.
Right. Well, just make sure that you double check the people that write that on April 1st if they actually go through with it, because could be just on you, right? So
good
now,
point.
when you were telling your story, it's a little bit abstract of a question, but you mentioned today that your portfolio is diverse and it spans across the construction spectrum. Now, obviously, I don't want numbers. Okay, I don't want to get into that. But can you elaborate just qualitatively on what that net worth portfolio looks like today to give capitalizers in the blue collar world a breakdown of one of the most successful blue collar workers' financials?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want numbers. All I can tell you is there are 5 different concerns within Rusk Industries. Each one of them could be a whole career on its own.
Yep. That
would be very successful for any family on its own. And it's in the tens of millions, but it's good, and it's something that I felt I had to do, because at any one company you're going to reach a level where you have to support yourself with that company, and then you support the people around you.
Right.
Well, I wanted more for myself, but I also wanted more for the people around me. So I went to them and I said, okay, we continue to grow at a really good pace here with this main company. If we can get some people around us to help us continue that process and take me out of the picture a little bit, I now have the freedom to go open up these extension companies or these different types of other opportunities. That in turn creates more revenue for me. I'm now less dependent on revenue from this company, which means I can share more of that with all of you. So you're kind of like buying your freedom to go create more. Sure. And people couldn't be happier because now they control their own financial futures, and they ask me all the time, how's that project going, and how's this one going, and what's next? They want me out of the building going out and prospecting and finding these other opportunities because it helps them as well. And I've said this before, and I know it sounds a little controversial, but I believe that when you run a company with a lot of people in it or whatever, I think your goal should be to make yourself irrelevant to that company. And I say that only because, not that you want to just disappear and not have an effect, but you want to be able to rise above that company, tear the roof off, look back down, and then plug yourself in spontaneously wherever you want to create, fix, repair, visualize, whatever. And take yourself out of the Ken has to do this or else it won't get done. Because the more relevant you are to your company, the more you can drive it, the more you can drive not only that particular opportunity, but any other ones that you come across as well.
Sure. Well, and also I should have said at the beginning, you could have shared numbers if you wanted to. We have some people that get very uncomfortable, and then we have some that are very honest. We had an investor on who I'll name nameless. Actually, he hasn't come on yet. And I remember hearing a story from another colleague asking him basically indirectly what his net worth was, which you don't really do, right? Like that's kind of just a taboo thing. And he just texted it. I mean, like almost to the penny. So we have people all over the spectrum. So I didn't want to put you in a corner, but
no, that's okay.
You know, for you, so elaborate more on that portfolio. So can you take me through how that's evolved over time? Because I imagine Rusk Industries was just one business, and then it spurred into these separate tranches.
Yeah, so you have a company that's growing from 6 people to 200. So what does that require? Well, that requires space. It requires offices. It requires warehouses. It requires all those types of things. So there was opportunities to invest in office buildings, not just for myself, but office buildings that I could build and then build them bigger than I needed them to, and then lease out these other office spaces to help cover the rent for me. So basically, I have somebody else paying for my building. Okay. So there's those types of things. And then once you know how to do that, then you do that offsite. You do it in another city or another town, and you create more investment real estate that way. So then your company grows and expands, and it gets beyond, the hour and a half drive or 2 hour drive that you can make in one day and be efficient. So now you open a satellite office. Well, that satellite office grows from 6 people to, I think, 70 or 80 right now. That in tune requires another office space, another warehouse, so now you're expanding into more real estate. And your real estate there is real estate that your own company helps support. And then again, if you want to add on to it, and you can supply other people office space as well, helping to cover what your initial investment. So those things begin to grow, and you just kind of let them happen, right? Because buildings don't necessarily call in sick. They just show up every day. So you've got that, and then you think to yourself, okay, what opportunities are there out there that are close to what I do? So you get involved in developments, maybe residential developments, and we did that in Branson, Missouri, where we have 28 lots on Table Rock Lake, which is a resort in Branson. And we're building houses, and there's boat docks, and it's kind of similar to what I do. You go from foundations that you fix to foundations that you build to foundations that you build elsewhere. And so that all kind of went along, and then now you have some capital from all these things, and you invest in things that maybe are supply side related to your company, but not something you touch every day, like construction chemicals. So we got into construction chemicals and invested in that, and that went crazy good. So that happens, and then then you look at your hobbies, and I happen to be a very health hobby person. I love the longevity conversations. I love the whole stem cells and exosomes and peptides and biologics. I love all that stuff, all the proactive medicines that you see out there, and versus the reactive ones that we use today. And there's opportunities there to invest in things like healthcare companies that are focused in that space, that are growing like crazy. And so we've done that. And then there's REITs, real estate investment trusts, people that I know that do that are very good at it, that start a new one, and they've had a successful track record, so you invest in that. So you can see how it just kind of spreads. But I never went too far from my core. Like, I didn't go from digging ditches to like opening hairdressing salons or something like that, something I don't know anything about. So yeah, I kind of stayed close. I guess you could call them line extensions if you're talking retail in this case as a comparison. But yeah, it's been good, and it's done great. I'm very blessed, very fortunate. I give a lot back, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do that.
Absolutely. Well, in the investment world, specifically like pension and endowment, we call it the core strategy, and then you surround it with satellite strategies. So it's the same thing. Now, can you remember, because especially as an owner, you're reinvesting all the time, which means there could be many moons where you don't take a paycheck. However, there was a point where you've turned the corner. I know your golfing tastes are expensive, and even though I know you're a great golfer, you've probably lost more than enough Pro V1s in your life. So when did you start taking distributions and reinvesting into yourself as opposed to the business, or balancing that distribution of profit?
You're saying when did I take and invest in myself, or in these other satellites?
In yourself. In yourself.
Okay. Well, I have a sign in the hallway that says, it's a neon sign that I designed and had someone build, that says work hard, play hard. And the reason I have that sign is because I always believe there's got to be balance in your life. And if you're gonna work as hard as we work, and I'm talking about jackhammers and dump trucks and concrete mixing and demolition, it's hard work. So we try to balance that out with as much possible fun as we can have. And so I'll tell you, I knew we opened this business when I was 23. I knew by the time I was 26 that I was going to start thinking really big. I'm going to Scotland to play golf. I'm just going to do that. I don't care if I have to plan it 3 years from now and save $40 a week in some account somewhere. I'm going to do that. I started thinking about, I was a car guy my whole life. My dad had cars later in life when he was successful, and the guy that I used to work for was really into cars, and I ended up taking care of most of his fleet of stuff, and it was something that I love to do. So yeah, I started in my first Porsche I bought was in 1995. And I remember I saved for 7 years to buy that car. And I remember going into the dealership and getting a brochure from the guy, and he's like, "Are you interested in buying a Porsche?" And I said, "Yeah, in 7 years." And he looked at me like I was from Mars. So I took that brochure, put it by my nightstand, and looked at it every once in a while, kept it in front of me. And year 2, I went back, I got another brochure. He still thought I was nuts. Year 3, year 4, he started to get a look in his face like, you know what? I'm actually starting to believe this guy. He's going to come back. Year 5, year 6, I went in with the brochure and I said, "How long does it take to order one of these?" He said, "About 8 months." I said, "Good, let's do it right here and right now." And he couldn't believe it. He was like, "Rusk, I never thought in a million years you were ever going to come back here and buy this car, but you did." And it took me 7 years and 7 brochures to get there, but I don't believe it's how fast you get something. It's, are you going to do it for sure or not? And I think that's it's an effective way to live, is to anticipate things like that.
Yeah, well, and then there's also things that transitioning a little bit, you can't necessarily anticipate. And when we first got together, we were, just loving the fact that we're both fellow girl dads. I'm a little bit more recently invited to that game. You're a little bit more vintage and experienced, but without getting into the details with your daughter, Nicole, she's overcome some tremendous adversity. And as a new girl dad, I cannot begin to fathom what you had to go through. And actually, I remember after reading the book, I said a prayer for you and your family, just because I
thank you.
I cannot, words cannot describe that. Again, if you haven't read the book, you need to go read it. It is there's positivity at the end. Let's just put it that way. But my question to you is this: what are some of the traits that you've gained from that experience that makes you a better businessman?
Well, first off, I was very grateful that I had built a staff of people, not in expectation of a tragic event like that, but in expectation of anything that would take me away, even looking for other opportunities. And although this wasn't an opportunity, it was an opportunity for me to get 100% involved and get her cured as fast and as best and however I could. And so I would tell you that I don't waste any time in my life since that happened, because when time is, as you get older, you recognize that time is your most valuable asset. And I think the last time we talked, I said, say yes to everything that you can as far as being with her. Watch every golf swing she takes if she chooses that. Watch every dance she's at. Watch every speech that she does in front of her classmate. I mean, do it all. Go be the guy who delivers the pizzas to them at lunchtime or pours the orange juice or whatever it is. Do it all, because it literally goes by so fast. I can remember, sometimes I'll see dads walking around with their daughters on their shoulders, walking around like this. And I just can't believe that, like 3 years ago, that was Nicole, but she's 26 years old. So it goes by so incredibly fast. So I think being grateful, bingo, huge. Okay? Yeah. Not taking things for granted, absolutely huge. Being spontaneous, you better believe it. Okay? Not being held back by drama or negative energy from other people. You've heard them called energy vampires, okay? Mm-hmm. Nope. Cut them all out. Being real focused on now, on the future, on what I can do for my family and for her, and also creating as many amazing moments for myself as I can, because it's not the things you possess that make it good. It's the moments you create with the things you possess that make it so good. It's the memories that you get. And, a car sitting in my garage can't do anything, but me whipping around a racetrack, that does a lot. So yeah, it's just that. It's just to being very present, being very grateful, and thanking God for everything that you've been able to pull off, and then having the responsibility and the moral character to say, okay, now I'm giving some of that away to somebody else so I can shorten their learning curve.
Sure. No, amen to that. Well, and you also have mentioned throughout your book what you called the big three. So comfort, peace, and freedom, and how they all relate to living a more successful and fulfilling life. Now, in regards to your own life, I'm going to say this so you don't have to, okay? It's safe to say that you live in the sweet spot of the big three. Again, we don't know what happens behind closed doors, but you wear it all well. Now, my question to you is this: what would you have told your younger self when you were first starting out in the business in order to increase that pace to achieving what I'd call the trifecta?
I would have said spend a lot more time and a lot more quality in visualizing what it is that you wanted, because you kind of learn sometimes. Let's take the Porsche, for example. I never set out to say, I'm going to start this visualization program that's going to last 7 years, and at the end of that 7 years, I'm going to have this car in my garage. I never did that. I just kind of said, well, you know what, my target is that because I have to do these certain things in order to clear the way for me to go ahead and do that, and it ended up being 7 years. I never realized, though, how powerful the visual side of my brain was, or all of our brains are for that matter. You know, you've heard it a million times. What your brain sees very clearly, it attracts itself to and gets almost every time. That's a responsibility because you need to remain in the positive side of what you see. Otherwise, if you spend the time on the negatives, you're going to get that too. But I think I would have told myself, you know, get a lot of clarity on what you want your life to look like, and recognize and arrive at what would be your perfect nirvana. What would be your combination of comfort, peace, and freedom? Ask yourself, if I could live like that, that would be really cool. And then draw that out, okay? Get brochures for all of it. Vacations, houses, cars, travel, business acumen, your health, your hobbies, your sports, parenting, being a great parent, draw that out. Your charity, your give back moments, your generosity, time, talent, and treasure. Draw all that out, because I don't want people to think that I focus on things as much as it is what you do with those things, and having the ability to, have one of my 18 or 20 dump trucks drive down the road in a parade, and have some of the people throwing out candy to the kids on both sides. I mean, you got a dump truck, but look at what you're doing with it. You're doing a really cool thing, and you're donating to the city and Make-A-Wish and all the other things that we do. So. Yeah, I would say I would have probably had me get a lot clearer on drawing it out. And that's part of the learning curve. So, if it took me 7 years to learn how powerful that brain connection was with the car, I should tell somebody not to wait 7 years to figure that out, but to start drawing it now and then let your life lead yourself to that eventual conclusion.
Yeah, well, and there's so much on the getting clarity aspect of things. A couple episodes our mutual friend Ryan Dusick was on, and he was mentioning that something similar, like I would have told my younger self to do this, this, and this. However, being a younger self, at least for him, being a rock star, when you're a young rock star, you're stubborn. You're not going to listen to anyone older, right? And I think it's probably the same for you and same for me. But one thing you brought up indirectly that I think is really valuable, that I hope listeners don't ignore, is remember to love the process. I'm not going to speak for you on the Porsche side of things, but I'm sure there are things that you've gone through or I've gone through where you're looking at the end game, but you forget to enjoy the ride until it's done. Now, you can go back and do that same ride again and again, whether it's writing a book or starting another arm of your business, but you can't go back to that core adrenaline rush. And I don't live with regrets, but that's something I even think about to this day. Like, man, I should have enjoyed those first couple years when I was miserable and broke and embarrassingly single. Now, you mentioned one of your mentors, Jim Malone. Is it Malone or Maloney? I think it's
Moline.
Moline. Okay. All right. Well, I'm 0 for 2. So he ran and owned one of the most successful construction companies around in your area. Yet you always saw him getting the job done no matter what alongside his people for years. Now, as a business owner, there have been times where I felt like I'm running and gunning and doing everything imaginable, which is part of what you signed up for. But my question to you as a fellow owner is this: how have you maintained the simple yet difficult balance and humbleness that no task is too low, but also I need to start delegating?
Well, I think delegation for me came from the fact that I just realized that I couldn't, nor did I want to try to do it all. I see so many guys that are very successful and they're miserable because they're chained to their companies, 70, 80 hours a week. And some of them kind of get off on, I'm always working. Okay, that's fine. If that's what makes you tick, then do it. for me, it was all about balancing the buckets. I mean, you've got all these things that I just mentioned, and I think you need to pour the water into each one of those buckets equally. And I didn't want to see, summer is short in Ohio, okay? I didn't want to see a bunch more sundowns without me hitting golf balls. I didn't want that to happen. And that's just one small example, doing cookouts or spending time with my family or walking my dog or whatever. So I didn't want to, in my office, I can see the sunrise and the sunset. It rises back there and sets over there. And I didn't want to spend my whole life in this box watching that continue to happen. So I thought, I'm just going to replicate what I do as much as I can. And some people say, well, how can you afford to do that? Well, it's simple, because let's assume, I'm just going to pick a number out of nowhere. Let's assume that your company does $5 million a year in revenue, okay? And that's where you're kind of clicking along at. So get these people together around you and say, hey, if we really push this thing, how far could we take it, do you think? Now, in your mind, you're going to think 6.2, 6.5. They're going to come up with 7, 7.5, and 8. And you're going to be shocked how much more aggressive their numbers are than yours. I mean, this is what happens. So now you're thinking, okay, well, let's assume that we do somewhere between 6.5, my number, and 8, their number. So if you can, present a package to them that says, well, if we get to those levels, I'm going to share a piece of that newfound money with all of you, to the point where you're going to be really happy, okay, like really happy.
Yeah.
And we're talking about checks that are 5 and 6 figures, okay. Mm-hmm. So they look at you and they go, wait, really? So we can do this, and you'll make that happen if we do this? And yeah, and I put these layers together. I don't want to belabor this point, but right. I put these layers together where everybody has their own monthly bonus. There's a quarterly profit bonus, and then there's an annual bonus based on these newfound numbers that we didn't have before. And what we'll do is when we hit those numbers, we will take some of that revenue, and we'll go to some place like Cancun or Cabo or somewhere like that to hand this out and to celebrate it for a week, and to pat each other on the back and hug it out because we all created this together. And invariably at the pool the next day, even if I'm not around, they're already talking about, well, what are we going to do next year to make this happen again? Because I wouldn't normally typically book a trip to Cabo myself, but through this process, I'm going to do this over and over and over. Right. And I'm also going to take this money and make my life better for it. So yeah, I think when you said before about, standing out, I've always thought, well, if I had all 200 people sitting in my parking lot right now, shoulder to shoulder, and I was in the middle of it or on one end, I wouldn't want anybody to be able to stand in front of that group of people and go, oh, wow, that's the boss right there. That's him. I wouldn't want that, because if that's the case, then I haven't done what I wanted to do to make this thing feel like the campus effort that it should be, Right. I certainly would never be comfortable having people come up, 15 floors in an elevator to see me. That's just not how I work. Yeah. But at the same time, I have a lot of freedom. My comfort, peace, and freedom level is really good. And there's a heck of a lot of people around me here that would say the same thing for themselves, too.
Capitalizers, this episode is sponsored by the best-selling book, Capitalize Your Finances, the how-to framework that takes you from compoundingly clueless to monetarily magnificent. Regardless of where you're at in your financial life, whether you're just beginning to express interest and commitment to your personal finances, at the pinnacle of your career, winding down into retirement, or thinking about your legacy for future generations, this book walks you through every step of the way so you can succeed on your terms and with your own values and passions guiding you. After reading this book, you will officially have Christopher A. Panayotu, the Cap in Capitalize, in your back pocket, guiding you in detail through every step of the way so that you can take charge of your finances, not the other way around. Head on over to Amazon.com today and start capitalizing your finances to the fullest with this incredible book, Capitalize Your Finances, the how-to financial framework that takes you from compoundingly clueless to monetarily magnificent. And now, back to the episode.
Well, and speaking of freedom, because when you're working on your business, when you're not in it, you also have the freedom to look around and see other opportunities. And so you've mentioned that it's not about what people are doing as much as it's what they aren't when it comes to blue collar work. And in your opinion, what do you see as the largest opportunity in the blue collar world where people, quote unquote, aren't doing, if that makes sense?
Unfortunately, it's a big area. Chris, we're talking about anything that you have to use these two things, and I'm waving my hands right now,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
You're talking about carpentry and electricians and plumbers and welders and estheticians and people that own their own bakeries and chefs and anything in energy, any kind of energy, new energy and old energy. If you think about it, right now, for every 10 contractors that retire, only 4 or 5 are coming online. So it doesn't take a supply and demand economics professor to tell you that where supply is low and demand is high, that's where the money goes. And now you're seeing carpenters, electricians, and plumbers making $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, and people are complaining about the fact that it takes them 3 months to get to them, and they can't believe how much they're charging to put an outlet in. Well, go to the other side of that equation, and you'll see that colleges are way overproducing these bland business degrees that are unusable, liberal arts degrees that are non-specific and unusable, and people coming out with $80,000 in debt thinking they're going to make $100,000 a year. And because there's so many of them, that number has now dwindled to 50 because they can choose from 100 different candidates to make this thing work. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a three-pronged story. Like when I was in high school, there was shop class. You could walk down the hallway, see someone changing a transmission, someone building a leg for a table, someone wiring an outlet, someone welding some metal. You could see somebody doing hair or nails or cooking. They took all those classes out of high school, and that's where millions of kids accidentally discovered how cool it was to be in the trades, right? Sure. So then you couple that fact with, I ran around my backyard building tree forts with hammer and nails and lumber and all that kind of stuff. You probably did the same thing. Now kids are building cities on Minecraft on their cell phones. I mean, that's not the same experience. I mean, I don't care what anybody tells you. So you have that kind of thing, the whole tablet generation. And then you have colleges that are really good at shaming you into saying, if you don't go to college, you're going to wind up flipping burgers. I mean, you're going to wind up being nothing. That's never been true. It isn't true now. It's less true now than it's ever been. And so you kind of have this triple-edged sword, if there is such a thing, working against the blue-collar fields. But you know what? Where if the whole herd's going this way, you might want to go that way because that's where the opportunity and the financial gain is going to be.
Yes, contrarian investing in the blue-collar world. That could be a lovely episode to your podcast. Now,
absolutely.
For you, so speaking of like blue-collar, white-collar, so Peter Thiel, okay, awesome investor, one of the founders of PayPal. He established the Thiel Fellowship, which offers $100,000 to 20 young people each year to skip college and pursue business ideas while being mentored by the foundation's network or framework. And you talk about this in your book. So as I was reading that, and as I got to know you the first time we spoke and in between, I've been curious, since you've garnished such a hold on the blue-collar landscape, have you ever thought of starting an equivalent but strictly focusing on the blue-collar side of businesses?
It's funny that you say that because I've done small scholarships here and there. I've worked with Junior Achievement, and I've worked with Boys and Girls Clubs, and I've told that story. And invariably, I'll get a half a dozen kids that walk up to me and say, I want to start my own hairdressing business, or I want to start a music business where I sell instruments, and I just think it's awesome. So, yeah, we tend to support those places with our dollars because we hope that those things shorten the learning curve for people that are getting into, doing something for themselves. And again, there's got to be balance. I mean, I interviewed this morning. I interviewed a young gal named Isla. She's 11 years old, and she started a bakery company in her kitchen. She was selling boxes of cookies by the street side, and now she's so busy. She comes home from school. She has her mom and other people in the family that are all helping her run this business. She put a GoFundMe thing out there. She got so much money from all over the country that she bought these double ovens and these stainless steel tables, and she's now thinking about how she can find a location, because once she finds a location, she can ship things all over the country in regulatory fashion.
Yes.
And people can enjoy her stuff, and her stuff's fantastic. And shout out to her. Isla's Divine Desserts.com. So she's such a great kid. And I asked her, I said, why do you think total strangers from around the country would give you money? Why would they do that? And she said, probably because they saw me willing to work hard and willing to make something happen, willing to do something, and they got excited about that.
And she's 11.
11. And her mom was sitting right next to her, smiling away, and we had a great conversation. So, yeah, I truly think that we've flipped this thing so much that carpenters are going to be making more than attorneys, and welders are going to be making as much as family doctors, and you're going to see this thing get really weird, but it's going to be an amazing opportunity. And for those people who say, well, that's just going to be cyclical, a good recession will pound that back into the dirt. No, it won't, because we haven't changed shop class in high school. We haven't put our kids back in the yard to go play in the creek and climb trees and go do those kinds of things. So that's not going away anytime soon, as far as I can see.
No. Well, one thing that you mentioned early on, and this was when you were going through everything with your daughter, as in regards to time being the most valuable currency there is. Now, you had that literally thrown in your face one Christmas when you had the elephant gift, okay? Yeah. And there was this clock that you got that calculated basically how much time you have left on Earth. And, when I was reading your book going, you couldn't reset this thing, and it's staring at you in the face, obviously you start prioritizing things a lot more efficiently. People would think it's ruthless. I would argue that you're just being more efficient with the time you have left. Now, my question with that is a multi-parter.
Okay.
So number one, do you wish you had that clock earlier in your career or life or not? And then number two, what have been the biggest benefits for you, since you shifted your mindset to the time method, or shall I say, the post-ticking clock of death method?
Well, first off, I was just getting to the point where I was really taking on a huge role in our company. So I was probably 26 or 7 when I got that clock. And when you're taking on when you're taking on a role of running your own show and growing a company bigger, you tend to want to show value everywhere. Okay, why is this 26-year-old kid telling me, a 45-year-old male or man or woman, how to run my sales program? I mean, who is he to tell me these things? So you're constantly running around trying to prove your value. Mm-hmm. And why you deserve to have this position, even though you're signed on the dotted line for all the money. You're taking all the risk. You're the only one that loses if it goes sideways. Sure. So, yeah. So I think what the clock did was it cut down the time that I really spent, trying to say, okay, I have a lot of value here, and this is why I should be doing what I'm doing, which is something that a lot of young presidents go through of their companies. It really is. So, yeah, I'm talking to someone on the phone. I'm looking at the clock. I'm seeing that I talked for 5 minutes. It's going backwards, and I'm not. This call doesn't mean anything. Okay, I'm just doing it because it was set up to do. So yeah, I started eliminating those kinds of things. You eliminate drama in your life. I told you carve out unproductive things. You carve out unproductive people. You carve out energy vampires. You do a lot of those things to make your time more useful. Now, how have I benefited? Well, again, that's where all the buckets came from. I have to start dipping very, very equally into everyone, or filling every one of these buckets. My spiritual side, my health side, my vacation side, my time with my family side, my charity side, and then those other things like, your houses and your things you want to acquire in your work. In fact, I have a sticky note on my computer to this day that says me first. And what I mean by that is I come in on Monday and the first thing I think about is what days am I working out? When am I going to golf? When am I going out to dinner? What fun am I going to schedule for myself? And then I fill work in after all that. And it just seems to work for me. I don't know if it would work for everybody, because some people feel like the only way they've done anything is if they go home and tell their spouse, oh man, look at me, I solved this and I fixed that and I answered this and I created that and I challenged these people on this and I changed this. Well, okay, that's fine. If that's how you feel value, then do it. But it certainly wasn't in my case.
Yeah. Now, I will briefly push back on the me first with having a just over 2-month-old daughter. I don't know how far that would go in the Panayiotou household right now, but I think after a year, I'm going to shoot my shot. And then if it doesn't work out, I'll just connect you and my wife and I can just throw you under the bus if that's okay.
Well, yeah, but the difference is spending time with your daughter is a me first thing. If that is something that supplants, doing that extra weird thing at work that you don't have to do, it's still me first. So yes. You win either way.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is the definition of the difference between a rookie dad and a veteran dad of getting out of the doghouse. So now in regards to financial planning, okay, you've mentioned the flaws of the statement, quote, when I get a bit of extra money, I'm going to start saving for my retirement, or a saving account for my retirement. And as you can imagine, I've also heard that in too many times to count. One thing that I think is really fascinating about the blue collar industry in general, doesn't matter where you're looking, is so the employees that I've seen on average, they don't really think as long term on the investment and planning side of things. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is on the flip side of that, the owners of these blue collar businesses are some of the most disciplined people I have ever met. And so the technical standard deviation curve is very massive. And so for you, I wanted to pick your brain on that. Where do you think that difference comes from specifically in the blue collar world? And do you see that shift in mindset for those shorter sighted employees to a more prudent time horizon? I can see it a little bit, but also when I come in and talk to people, they kind of know, oh, I need to put my mature hat on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think it's kind of built in the industry that sometimes people think that blue collar workers, they just live for Friday and going out to the bar on Friday night and spending half their paycheck with their buddies.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of built in a little bit. It's kind of a stigma that's always been there.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, for me, you can flip that switch with two quick stories. Actually, it's one combined story. So, most people wait until, this, they're in their mid-30s or late 30s. Oh, I need to start thinking about retirement. That is so way too late to come to the game, and you know this. So when you tell somebody who's 21 or 22, I can make you a millionaire in 20 minutes, you're going to get their attention. Okay? And when you start talking about, at least in our situation, and this isn't for everyone, but the 401k is such a valuable tool in our business. You get two people, and I do this all the time. I'll get one guy and another guy, and they'll be standing up, and I'll say, okay, this guy decided to start saving $60 a week in his 401k. He not only saved the whole dollar pre-tax, but I gave him a quarter on top of that. So there you go. This guy tried to do the same thing on his own. He only gets 75 cents of the money because he had to pay taxes, right?
Right.
So then this guy had to do this for 10 years, and he's done. He saved for 10 years. He's done. When he retires, because of the time value of money and the power of young money, he's going to have over $1 million in his retirement account, and it took him 20 minutes to fill out that documentation, right? The other guy he's going to wait till he's 33 to do it, 35, 38. He's going to have to save for 30 years just to barely catch up to this guy and not even come close to what he's going to have at the end of the day. So you put that example out there, and they almost look at you like, that can't be real. Oh, yeah, it is. And so a lot of times I'll say to somebody, I'm going to pay you $50,000 a year, but I want you to thank me for paying you $47,000 a year. Okay? And they look at you like, okay, you're from Mars. No, I'm not from Mars. I want you to forget about that first $3,000. You never had it. You never spent it. You're not used to getting it. You don't see it on your paycheck. It's going to disappear. Live on the 47, okay? Live on that, because this is how I'm going to make you a millionaire in 20 minutes. Yeah. And they look back and they go, wow, I normally would have waited until the end of my month or the end of my money to even think about saving. But what you're saying is get it out of the way first and never think about it again. Absolutely. Why they don't teach that in high school, I think is one of the biggest tragedies of our educational system. Why they don't teach simple compounding interest and investing and have guys like you go in and say, guys, this is so easy to do and it's so much more powerful when you're young. Don't wait till you're old like us to try and do this. Yeah. It just boggles my mind.
Yeah. Well, and I can actually speak to why I can't speak to why it's not in school. That I cannot. I never will be able to crack that code. I will say, from the motivation side of things, it's no different than anything. You've got to want it. Now, I like that story where you say, hey, I can make you a millionaire in 20 minutes. Now, if they just say no, then they're screwed. I mean, you can't help them. Right. But it's amazing to me, and I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole, how in schools, in particular public schooling today right now, just the lack of care of that topic, which, again, part of it, I get it, because when you're in elementary school, middle school, high school, at least for me, I cared about, sports and hanging out with my friends. I didn't really care about that stuff per se. But again, I agree with you. There needs to be that inflection point, and that's music to my ears, knowing that the blue collar world is shifting that. Because again, there are stigmas and stereotypes with every business. Now, fun fact about you. You absolutely love the game of golf. And yes. As we're recording this, actually, this was just after the Masters. And so when you first asked me how I was doing, and I said excellent, I should have said not as well as John Rahm, but I'm doing pretty well. Now, right. You've mentioned in golf, which, again, I can relate to wholeheartedly, there's always something to work on and improve, and it's all on you. Now, this is going to be a bit of an abstract question for you, but I've been excited to throw it at you.
Okay.
Being a golf fan, what would you say is the blue-collar business equivalent of ripping a driver, being deadly with your chipper, and mastering your putting, like the parallels in the business?
I would say ripping a driver is when you've got this group of entrepreneurs around you, and you can see that they're all clicking on their own gas. They're all doing their own thing, but they're doing it as a cohesive unit. And you start hitting these big goals. You start hitting these goals that you never thought. Like, I never thought I could hit it 300 yards, but occasionally, with the right wind and the right angle, I'm going to do that. And to see that happen, I think is really, really cool. So that's definitely ripping the driver. Okay. I would say being deadly with my chipping. Well, there's something that every business owner really wants to make sure that he has, and that is an awesome reputation. Okay? Mm-hmm. So for me, it's all about, that's a very delicate thing to do. It's a very delicate balance, keeping that we have a 4.7 record on Google, and we're trying to get a 4.8. We're working very hard at it. It's hard to do. Mm-hmm. And, there's things like the Better Business Bureau and all these other Angie's List and all these other consumer groups that look at you all the time. So I would say having a great reputation where your customers feel like they got a 5-star experience, because it's very delicate. Every customer is different. Every customer understands and doesn't understand things. There are customers that are expressives, that are analyticals, that are amiables, that are drivers. And you have to delicately, figure out a way to make those people really, really happy day in and day out, and then stand behind what you do. If I thought about the putter, I would say that there are systems that you do. There are, the reason people buy franchises is because there's a well-worn path of success before them. Okay, so with the putter, I would say these are things that you have to do. You have to be very precise. You have to be very intentional. You have to follow a definite, I would say, almost habit and a procedure. And with a putter, there are things you need to kind of read. You need to kind of see where the ball is going to go, or you need to see what's going to affect its path. But you still stroke the ball the exact same way every single time. And so I think applying the methods that work and not straying too far from the things that work, but reading your audience at the same time to make those last minute changes, I think that'd be putter-like, I guess.
That could be the best answer we have ever had in the history of the show. My team was a little hesitant for me to ask it, but of course I'm going to roll the dice, and you stuck the landing on that.
Thank you.
I mean, for those that are listening in and not watching on YouTube when this airs, I am just gooberly smiling from ear to ear for that. Now, I have to ask, okay? So when you played St. Andrews with your buddies, what was your score? Just really quick.
I shot 79.
Good God. Good for you, man. That is fantastic. So
yeah, it was cool.
So before we close it out, we have a couple more questions, and then, being a man in high demand, both in the office as well as on the golf course, I want to be respectful of your time. And so briefly, let our listeners know a little bit more about your class and what it entails online.
So many times you see people that read these self-help books, or whatever you want to call it, entrepreneur books or whatever they are. And they read the book and they get all excited and they put the book on the shelf, and then they go to work on Monday and they don't really implement anything that they learned from that book. Or they try to do it for a week and it doesn't really work. They don't get the feedback instantaneously that they wanted, so they kind of abandon it. And I always love it when I see guys that have behind them a whole shelf, a whole wall full of books that they've read. And I begin to ask them, well, how did that one change your life? And how did this one alter what you do? And maybe they can answer, maybe they can't. But, I wanted to make sure that, we had done some book clubs here long ago. Who Moved My Cheese? Books like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, those kinds of things where we read the book and then we had a class where we implemented the things and actually put them into practice. Gung Ho, all those kinds of books. So I wanted to make sure that I could develop something where a young person or a person that maybe already went to college is in their mid-30s, but they hate what they did and they never wanted to go and they want to get back to a trades job or whatever, and to do something they're more passionate about. Or even a business owner who wants to do what I just said. You have a book club meeting with all of his staff and go through this course. I put this together because I wanted you to read the book and not say, wow, that was an awesome book, that was really cool. I wanted you to say, okay, and I took what he said, I put it into practice today, and my life is different because of that. It's called The Path to Success, and it's like a blueprint for your life here. And it's 8 sessions. It's 45 minutes a session, and it's funny, Chris, because I've seen so many of these courses that are $1,500, $2,000, $3,000. No, I priced this thing at $129. You get a free $25 book with it. And when you buy that, you can donate one to a friend or a neighbor or a loved one that you think might need some help as well. So it's kind of a buy one, get one free thing. I'm looking to help people not only help themselves, but help somebody else in the process. And I really hope people take advantage of it and take it, because, so far I've had rave reviews on it that people are like, okay, now I get it. I'm in control of my life. I'm in control of my input. I'm in control of my output, the quality of that output, my day, my time, my schedule, my financial gain. I'm in control of all this, not the powers that be everywhere else. And I've had awesome feedback from it, so I hope people enjoy it, take it, and make something happen for themselves.
And I think they will. Now, before we close out, I have one final question for you. In any business, it's not the obvious things to avoid that can hurt you, because, again, it's obvious. It's the not so obvious. And in your opinion, what are the biggest not so obvious aspects of the blue collar business that those in the world need to watch out for that they otherwise wouldn't know is a danger?
Well, there's obviously compliance issues, things that come out from nowhere to bite you. Like, there's always like a wage an hour thing that someone could come in and audit you on, or, they audit you from your financials and that kind of thing. And, maybe workers' comp compliance issues. I mean, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's stuff that you work really, really hard, and you have a lot of people. There's always going to be a mistake or two, and they come in, they check it out, and maybe there's an adjustment, and then you move on. So those are kind of like baked in the cake. I think that's just part of running a business. But I think the biggest thing for me to watch out for is, are the people in your company, are they succeeding for themselves? Are they chasing something? Are they actively anticipating things? And are they working like someone who is anticipating good things for themselves? Because the more people you have rowing together, the farther they're going to take your company, way further than you can take it on your own. Trust me there. And their numbers and expectations are going to be higher than your own. So I would just say, be careful that you don't put the ceiling on yourself, because the people around you will blow that ceiling out. And just make sure that they're all chasing something. You're going to have a really good result.
That is awesome. Now, Ken, where can capitalizers go to best support you?
Well, if you go to kenrusk.com, you'll see what we're up to there. You can buy the book, you can buy the course, you can buy them independently. If you go to Ken Rusk Official, you'll see all the different socials there, and you'll see what we're up to there, talking about just mindsets and how we feel about life and setting goals and making your life happen for yourself. And it's been really good. I never thought this thing would go 10 feet, much less 10 miles that it's gone, and it's been really great. I'm eternally grateful and very blessed. Thank the Lord for a lot of it, and it's been a hell of a ride.
Absolutely, man. Well, I am thankful to call you a friend, and we're going to have you back on very, very soon. And for those of you that are tuning in, as always, thank you so much for listening in to Capitalize Your Finances. For those of you newbies, if you have any questions, comments, concerns about today's episode, please either give me an email, shoot me an email, chris@capitalizeyourfinances.com, or give us a call at 253-214-3050, and I would be more than willing to answer anything on your lovely brain. As always, I'm your host, Chris Ray Paniotu, the Cap and Capitalize, and until next time, keep capitalizing. Take care.
You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. Investments in non-traded real estate investment trusts, REITs, are subject to significant risks. You should carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of a non-traded REIT before investing. The prospectus, which contains this and other important information, can be obtained from your financial advisor. You should read it carefully before investing or sending money. This material should not be considered a solicitation of an offer to sell or buy any specific security or offering. Investors should consult a financial professional to determine whether risks associated with an investment in the shares are compatible with their investment objectives. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. Christopher Paniotu is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Capitalize Your Finances, a separate entity from LPL Financial. Ken Rusk and any other individual or company mentioned in this podcast are not affiliated with Capitalize Your Finances or LPL Financial.